Well, anyway, yeah, this is the Kitsap Sun's editorial board, as you know, and we're talking to Travis Couture, who's a candidate for North Mason School District position two? Three, director three. Well, yeah, why don't you take a couple minutes, tell us, some of your background and why you decided to run this year.
I decided to run for the school board because I have first of all, I have 3 kids, and one of them is a special needs child with autism, Asperger's disease, and he was going to Silverdale Elementary, and we're having a lot of problems with the special ed program, and so it's a big deal to move a child with Asperger's anywhere to shake up their schedule and their routine. So I wanted to make sure, number one, that in North Mason, where we live, that the special education program was top-notch, and I believe that it can be if we focus on it. The second part is that the North Mason School Board is going through a lot of tough times with the Feller Center and just interacting with the community. There's been problems in the past with people bringing up the fact that there's not enough accountability with the school board or with the school district to the citizens, that things aren't being done transparently, and that the fiduciary responsibilities of the school district aren't really being fully met. That financially they could be doing better, and also with test scores they can be doing better. And so I think that I bring a different kind of perspective. We've had the same people in there for a long time, and I think that I could make a difference on the school board if I was on the North Mason School Board.
Okay. Yeah, Feller, we definitely do want to ask your opinion on Feller and kind of the future of what you would see down there. Maybe explain, let's see that one first. Tell me what you mean about kind of this feeling that people don't know what's going on, or you said not enough accountability as far as what the district's doing in their involvement down there.
Yeah, well, the district and the superintendent and some people believe that the school district should not be involved in the Feller Center at all, because that's not what a school district traditionally is involved with, and they have to spend education dollars to make the upkeep and everything. And I can sympathize with that to some extent, but I just was at a candidate forum a couple weeks ago, and the argument that I made is that Belfair is now 100 years old, and back before all of us, the Fellers had generously donated the land for the schools, and part of that was the legacy of the Feller Center and the trails and the wetlands. In the past, they had tried to surplus that property, and surplus is a fancy word for the Feller Center has no educational value. Now, if you've ever been to the Feller Center or the trails or the little schoolhouse they have there, there's tons of educational value. It's just like going to any public park where they would have, talking about all the wildlife that was there and all the plant life and nature and everything like that. Exactly. And the center has a lot of that stuff, and then there's a schoolhouse on the trails too, where there's actually a huge skeleton of a beach whale, so kids are going on this all the time.
And classes regularly use that for
right,
science.
And so it definitely does have educational value, so it was a mistake to try to surplus it, and although I understand how it's not a traditional thing for a school board to be, or a school district to be involved in, the argument I'm making is that's what makes the North Mason School District unique, and that we have to try to preserve and protect that and figure a way to take care of it. And I think that the solution, I think that there's many people in the community that have various different solutions, but those people aren't being listened to because they don't fit into the let's get rid of it category. And I think a lot of those solutions are probably very viable, and I don't think that it would be too hard to fix that problem and then preserve it for the future generations.
So the school district taking a greater financial stake
Well, right
in the
now they
city.
have all the financial stake in it, and they're trying to, lease the Feller Center. They tried to lease the Feller Center with the Port of Allen, and that didn't work. And the problem is that they were giving money to the Feller Center, but it was being horribly mismanaged, which is kind of a scandalous thing that if you ask people, they got different opinions on how that went. But the bottom line is that the money that they had poured into there for a long time had been squandered. And those people who had managed that money have now been gone, have been fired. But
Do
that
you think the
doesn't.
district can afford to keep funding that, or is it something where, you mentioned creative solutions? Is this
Oh yes, I think they can afford to keep funding it.
without asking for voters for additional money?
Right, and they have been, but I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to a Feller levy for the school. I'm very kind of skeptical of levies. I want there to be an exact purpose how we're going to spend the money. That was another question that's been brought up on the campaign trail. If there's a levy, should there be specific reasons why we use the levy money and for what? And yes, I do, and that goes back to the fiduciary responsibility. I think that if you're asking the taxpayers for their money, then yes, there should be a specific reason for what you're using that money for. It shouldn't just go into a slush fund for the school district to spend however they wish. So.
Do you think the district is fulfilling its potential down there, or do you think there's more things that can be done?
I think there's more things that can be done. One problem that we had recently, some citizens were complaining to the school district that some of the trails had not been kept up, and so they were unsafe. Trees that are about to fall could potentially fall on kids on the trail or people that are running on the trail. And see, it's not just for the kids though. The whole community uses this. If you go down there on a summer day or a spring day, you can see people jogging on the trails, or the churches, they use the big field they have down there, and there's a playground, and there's a ton of stuff for the entire community to use, and it does get used. But the problem really that I want to get to is that I went to a school board meeting in North Mason recently where the question was asked by one of the directors, Dinah Griffey, because there had been this problem where the public wasn't able to interact with the school board and get questions answered. So Dinah Griffey, one of the school board directors, asked the question, well, maybe we should have a town hall meeting separate from the board meeting so that we can answer all these questions, and as many as we need until all the questions are answered, which seems like a pretty common sense thing to do if there's a lot of people that have questions. Well, there was outright hostility on the board over doing something as simple as that, and my position is that if the people who elected you want you to answer some questions, then you answer them. The people that elected you, that's your boss. And so it kind of boggles my mind a little bit to see something like that.
That's the transparency.
It goes straight to the transparency part, and if you don't want to talk to people or answer questions, it makes it look like there's something to hide.
Did Dinah say what those questions what those were?
No, she didn't go into any of what the questions were. She just said there's a lot of questions that could potentially need to be answered, and a lot of these people I can sense that they know what the questions are.
But need to be answered generally within the education of the district, or just a specific?
Things like
specific reason why she's.
There's a bunch of things: policy, governance, Common Core type of stuff, Feller Center stuff. I mean, so there's a lot of things that have kind of been built up and festering. Things with the new school that they had just built with the $65 million bond. So I mean, there's a lot of things going on. People like me with special education kids, special needs kids, that need to make sure that the teachers are actually following the IEPs, the individual education plans, or else your kid is not going to get a good shot. And that's one thing that I'm really passionate about. But it's not just me. There's albeit a small group, but a very passionate group of people with special ed special ed kids that really they can't be there every step of the way, and so they worry about it. They want to be able to make sure that their kids can get a step up. And that's the thing, is that these kids can graduate and can be fully functioning members of society, but you have to actually be doing all the steps. And the thing about the special ed is that each school gets the same funding, and they all have to follow the same rules. But you have something like Emerald Heights Elementary, where parents, special ed kids, parents will fight each other to get into that school, and they have to pick, certain, and so that's a very coveted school, but they get the same set of rules and the same funding as every other school. And so why is that? Why is it that, and that's the questions that I want answered when I go to the school board, if I go to the school board, is why is that?
Were you living in, I'm just going to ask you a personal question real quick. Were you living in Central Kitsap District when your child started going to Silverdale Elementary?
No, I wasn't. We kept them at that school, so that, because when you try to trade schools, previously, but we live in Belfair.
Okay.
And so, when we had been living in Belfair while they were going to Silverdale, we had to drive them all the way there. And, but I mean, that's causes a hardship on us having to go all that distance.
That was, I guess, I don't totally know how it works, but that's something, if your child had already been going there, you move, there's some kind of a grandfather.
You can have a preference when you have special ed kids, where to send your kids up to a certain extent, and they've got a lot more lenience on that.
Travis, if I understand correctly, the Mason, North Mason School Board has given a lot of freedom to the superintendent.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that's good or bad, I don't know enough. But what are your thoughts about the relationship, not only of how let's say the work has been divided up, or responsibilities, and the relationship of the superintendent to the board itself?
Well, I mean, that's what
policy governance.
Policy governance.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not sure exactly how much you guys know about policy governance, but I actually had one of the first things I did is I met with the superintendent to talk about, after I had said I was going to run, to talk about a lot of things. And she handed me a booklet about what policy governance was. And I opened it to the third page, and it says, "Do not use for school boards." And so, I mean, it says,
say that one more time.
on the third page of the policy governance guide, it says, "Do not use for school boards." And so when I pointed that out, it was kind of shuffled under the rug a little bit. But that's the whole problem, is that if we wanted to have a superintendent who controlled everything, then why elect a board? And all of us talk about, we want more local control in our schools. We want to have more decision making at the parents' hands. And then some people will say, well, the parents need to have more of a role in their children's education. Well, how is that possible when they keep taking the power away from the parents and giving it to one person? And I really like Dana, who's the superintendent, and I think she's very sharp and she's smart. I don't always agree with her on everything, but I think that, she's trying to do the best that she possibly can. But everyone knows that when one person is in charge of something so large, that there's ripe for, possibly missing things, or even abuse or whatever, and it depends on the person. But it's why we elect a school board, to answer the questions, to be accountable, to make sure that the fiduciary responsibilities are being followed, and that we're good stewards of the taxpayers' money, to actually look at curriculum. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, well, you school board people aren't the experts. We'll just divert to the superintendent, the principals, and the teachers of what the curriculum's going to be. And I'm for that. But at a minimum, maybe the school board should actually review what it is, and if there's parents or community people out there that have questions about what the curriculum is, how could you answer it if you haven't reviewed it? And so, there's a big problem there. But yeah, I'm kind of getting off in the weeds. Back to your question, I don't think that the superintendent should have, amassed all of this, I don't want to call it power, but, all the responsibilities. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of these problems.
What's your opinion of the job she's done?
As compared to the previous superintendent, I think she's done far better. But the previous superintendent was kind of ousted because he was the most non-transparent and non-accountable person that you could possibly, imagine in a school district, and the community had enough of that guy, which was David Peterson. But, when you compare him to that, she's done a great job, but so far she's fairly new. She's and I always view her as someone that's willing to listen and to listen, meet with you and listen to you. But then again, I'd go back to, this is why we have a school board there. The school board is there to direct what the superintendent does. They're not there to just cram through the pipeline what the superintendent wants. And there's a distinction there, and it's kind of like a check and balance, a separation of power, so to speak. And
so does the superintendent have certain members of the school board that she works closer with than others that kind of voids this transparency issue? I'm a little confused.
Some people would, I think, say that, but I'm not going to,
So how can you change this, Travis?
How can I change this?
Right.
Well, because I wouldn't be that person that wants to, work as a small little,
But you're
group.
just one person.
Right, well, I've run for office a few times, and if I thought that if I was just one person I couldn't change anything, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I think that if it only takes one person to stand up for anything, and then you can change anything that, that you want, hopefully. And if you don't try it, then you will never know what could have been. So, the best that I've always said is, and I teach the kids this, is that if you really believe in something and you're passionate about something, you fight till your last breath about it, and when they drag you off the earth, you leave your claw marks in it, and so I think that, yes, one person, it might take more than one person, but it starts with one person, and I think that if you rally enough people to your cause, and you're talking common sense, and you're for the right things, that one person can change things.
You made a comment about Common Core earlier, but maybe I'm not going to ask specifically about that right now, but about standardized testing in general and how it plays out in that district. What do you hear? Do you hear from teachers? Do you hear from parents? And what's your opinion in general of the use and the appropriateness of standardized testing to do the best for kids?
I've heard a lot of, from, and I guess this would probably be from parents or from voters, is that, they believe that there should be a test, but they don't believe that we should be teaching the test.
Sure.
Right. And if that makes sense. And a lot of teachers I do have a few teacher friends. They teach in the lower grades, kindergarten, first, second grade, and they're not really too happy about a lot of the Common Core curriculum that they have to follow, and it's very non-traditional in some ways, but as far as the testing goes, it's interesting that in the North Mason School District, we have the two elementary schools. We have Belfair and we have Sand Hill. And the Sand Hill girls actually performed astronomically well, better than the whole state. And the Belfair girls, even though it's, as the crow flies, maybe a couple miles away or less, were below average. And so why is that? And they were happy, as I was, that the girls at Sand Hill performed well. But how do we take that and kind of mime or copy that, what's going on there, and reproduce it?
Oh, you got a new
Yeah.
principal for one thing.
We did get a new principal, and I think he's a great guy. So we're going to see what he can do, and I think that he's actually looking into that exact thing. And so Dan is a really smart, intelligent guy.
I heard he was badly needed.
He was badly needed, but he seems to be so far doing a great job. We went to the open house for the Belfair Elementary, and he was there talking to and staying late, talking to all the parents about all their individual needs and really paying attention. So I really like that he's there.
You said two things before that you ran before.
Mm-hmm.
What were the positions that you ran for?
Before I ran for the state senate in 2014.
35th?
Yeah, in the 35th district, and I ran for Mason County Commissioner back in 2012.
You made a comment about the high schools and things you're hearing. Obviously, that's been kind of a big celebrated thing in Belfair with the construction this fall. What did you mean by that? You said maybe you were hearing some things about the high school construction?
Oh, well,
Maybe you're feeling-
some people are concerned about before it was finished, what's taking so long, what's the status of the construction on this, or, what's the deal with, some people were concerned why the school spent more money to put in a big mega septic system as opposed to actually connecting to the Belfair sewer, which would have been cheaper and would have helped Belfair. And so there was a lot of things like that, and that weren't really being answered. A lot of things I hear about how the finances are run there, I'm not privy to because I don't get to go to the executive sessions, but I do hear, and it's only rumor, that
Not necessarily issues with the...
I don't want to get into any
thing itself.
rumors,
Yeah.
but we hear a lot about stuff like that that's going on. And, here's a good instance. There's a man, I'm not going to bring up his name, but there's a man who's actually asked for a public records request from the board, and they refused to give it to him. So he had no other choice to get those records than through litigation. So because of the school district's lack of transparency and accountability as to following the public records laws, now they've opened themselves up to lawsuits and litigation over things like that, and I think that's totally avoidable if they just simply release a record. And if there's nothing to hide, then there should be no problem in releasing a school record, And it's not an individual person's, records. This is records about the operations of the school district. And so things like that to me are just kind of way out in left field and should be easy to fix, given the right new people on the board.
Have you been going to school board meetings?
Yes.
How long have you been, since you enrolled, or before that were you?
Yeah, since I've started
The campaign.
running. And then before that, there's a group of people, and all the school board meetings are actually on video now, and so you don't have to go, you can watch the videos if you can't make it. But yeah, there's also a group of people that transcribes everything that's said at the school board meeting. So there's that also, and so there's a whole community meetup group called the North Mason Community Voice that meets up and talks about all this stuff that I'm a part of, and so I hear a lot of what's going on.
What I was asked is two things. I haven't heard you talk about teachers in depth, and how do you feel about classroom sizes and things like that when it comes to the teaching?
Well, I think that if you're a teacher, you're always going to want a smaller classroom size. I was actually very pleased and proud of our teachers in North Mason when they decided not to strike, and they just started the school year responsibly. I was very happy about that, and we actually joined them. They had like I don't want to, it's not a picket line, but they were sign waving, and they also had people come up and they were giving information. We joined them and we talked to all the teachers that were there about what their concerns were, and some of it was classroom sizes, some of it was pay, and I'm not actually opposed to paying teachers more. A lot of people might think differently, but I'm actually opposed to, if they're good teachers, I think we should pay them a lot, you know, so, and, you know, I don't have all the answers on exactly how we should, you know, judge which teachers are good or not, but the school districts already do have growth policies, student growth policies, which they judge the teachers on already. And so if you know, let's start with that. If the student growth is good, then yeah, maybe we go back to the table, and if the state can't do anything to raise teacher wages, maybe the community can through a levy or something like that.
But the bad teachers make just as much money as the good teachers, and you can't change that.
That's true.
Yeah, let's say you get in, you're sitting on the seat. What's the first thing that you're gonna try to attack?
Well, I don't look at it as attacking, but
Well, yeah, you want to take it.
the first thing is I think that needs to be looked at is the policy governance, because unless the school board can take back some of its power, then it really can't do anything. And so you have to look at the policy governance, and the school board is going to have, I would hope, is forced into a larger role in the school district, which it should be. That's the way it was intended to be. And so that's, I think, would be the first thing I would look at.
As the last question, we're kind of wrapping up on the end of our time that we promised. I always ask, first, is there anything we haven't touched on that you just wanted to mention that we didn't get to ask you about? And then the second is kind of give us a final statement, and maybe, you know, why are you different than your opponent for a voter?
Actually, Laura's my next door neighbor, so, you know. I really do like Laura. She's a really nice lady. She's been there for a while, and I just happen to have some different views than she does. Just observing some of the school board meetings and what's being said by the different school board directors, I just think that I would bring a totally different approach than she would. And I think maybe that since that school board has essentially been pretty close to the same for so long, that maybe injecting some new ideas into it would be a good thing.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
See you again. Good luck.